This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. On the show, you'll hear from leading Australian business owners as they share the lessons they've learned building their companies. You'll learn from their successes as well as some of the challenges they faced along the way. We also talk to experts from a range of fields who share specialised techniques you can use to improve your business. I'm your host, Sevan, and I'm a director at Alexander Spencer, and I'm really passionate about helping Australian businesses succeed. Recently, we moved into a new office. It was a daunting task that took over 18 months, but we were supported by ODC Design, an interior design and construction company, to help us through this journey. Peter Craig, the managing director, joins me today to go through the process we went through, and he'll answer all the questions that you might have if you're going to go through a similar process. Let's dive in. Peter, thank you so much for joining me on The Bottom Line.
Thank you, Sevan.
I'm really excited to have you on. We've gotten to know each other over probably an 18-month journey. We've had a lot of social media posts about our beautiful office, and you are the man behind the scene, the managing director of ODC. But before we get to ODC, we love to get to know our guests. So tell us about your journey in life, in business, and yeah, we just want to get to know a little bit about Peter Craig and how you got to where you got to.
Okay, well, it started a few years back, as you know, Sevan. So carpenter by trade, went to a tech school in Jordanville in Ashwood, finished to year 11 as such, and then got an apprenticeship as a carpenter with back then was called the Public Works Department, and landed my first job role working underneath the steps of Parliament House in the city. It was a very long, narrow room, and I had two other carpenters and I was the apprentice, and was there for about 9 to 10 months, and then moved on to some other sites that the Public Works Department had on. But that's where my career started. And what really inspired me back then was I was in the middle of Bourke Street. I'd walk down to Bourke Street and see these foremen with a hard hat on and plans underneath their shoulder. And I thought to myself, wow, that's what I want to be one day. I want to stay in the building trade and inspired to that. And the other thing that inspired me back then was back in those days, in the 80s, site supervisors used to have that hard hat on the back ledge of their old cars. I thought, that's what I want to do. And that's where it started for me, for my career.
Yeah, well, let's talk about ODC, and maybe before we even get to ODC, there might have been other things you did. So tell us your journey from there. Tell us about how you don't look like a carpenter.
No, I don't look like a carpenter.
When I first saw you. So you've obviously grown from there, but tell us your journey into business and tell us how ODC eventually got there. But yeah, I'd love to dissect that.
It started as apprentice carpenter, then worked in hardcore carpentry, building primary schools for the state government. And when I was 23 years of age, I was on site and I was the leading hand carpenter and I had about 30 blokes under me. I was the youngest one on site. The business basically said to me, you've got what it takes to move through your career path and we want to give you the opportunity to be a site manager. So for me, that was a big thing at 24, 25 years of age. And then from there, when Jeff Kennett got into government, he actually shut down a lot of the public sectors and we all got retrenched. And at that point, I was like, boy, what am I going to do? This was in the 80s, it was very hard to get a job. And I went for a number of project management positions. I think I probably put out about 50 or 60 applications. And then what happened was I got a few interviews and then I sort of saw this ad for this site manager in office fit out. I thought, okay, that's a bit unusual. So on that particular day, I got interviewed. It was on a Saturday and there was about 80 guys there. And I thought to myself, I haven't got a hope of getting this job. There's 80 of us here. The guy actually interviewed us for about 10 minutes and then he just said, next, and sat there. And then I went to another second interview, and that was for about an hour. I was told there was about 6 of us getting into it, or 6 of us having the opportunity, and you were one of the 6. So from there, I didn't really hear anything from the guy, and I didn't hear from him for, say, 4 to 5 months. Then I get a phone call 6 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon saying, "Oh, do you remember me? I want you to start with me." I go, "Really?" I go, "When?" He goes, "I need somebody. I need you to start tomorrow." I've gone, "But I've got other things on." "No, but if you want this job, you'll be there." That's what it was like. And I said, "Okay, I'll make some other arrangements and I'll be there." So I was there. And that's how I landed into the office fit out game as a project manager then. From there, I stayed with that guy for about 3 or 4 years. And then I actually got approached by ODC Design, the original managing director, say, "Listen, I've heard about you in the industry. Are you interested to come and have a chat?" At that time, I knew it was sort of time to leave, and I've been here ever since. And from there, I bought out 2 directors and have basically run the business myself for the last 20 odd years. But the company's been around for nearly 40.
Wow, what a journey. From a carpenter to a man in a suit. I have to say, you've done an amazing job here. You've been in office design, office build for such a long time. I don't know if there's too many companies in Australia or even Victoria that can say that that's a niche that they work on and that's what they do. And you do an awesome job. Let's dive into the office design world. Tell us about how the journey of office design has evolved and where are we at now and what are you seeing?
Okay, so it sort of works in a 5-year pattern, as I see. When we first got in the industry, everybody had a cubicle that they worked in. There was walls, either full height walls being an office, or they would be half height walls to about 1.5 metres high. And you went into your cubicle, you probably got about 6 or 7 square metres of space, and that's where your zone was. You went in there and you didn't really see much else until you stuck your head out and you went to the lunchroom or whatever. Today's more modern office is moved now to more open ceilings, more natural light, more interaction, more collaborative spaces. There are still companies out there building offices for their staff, similar to what you did, Sevan, with your key staff members. But you don't actually see a lot of that now. You mainly would see a number of boardrooms, meeting rooms, some zones where people can gather together, some high benching, some low soft seating, just for collaboration. And then, as we know, since COVID, things have changed again with, at the moment, it feels like 60% of the week people are in the office and the other 40% are at home, or vice versa. So it's really changed since then. And I feel also that trying to entice and senior management trying to get their staff back in, they've got to give the staff some really nice entity to work within to entice them back. And that's been the key to it since COVID, and probably a little bit prior to that because it was leading into that.
Let's talk about the service offering because we obviously went through a journey. Christopher Goodwin, who joined us on the show, who helped us find the space. One of the things that was really interesting to me was that we needed to engage with an office design person very quickly because we looked at so many buildings and office spaces and the ones that we liked were not really custom to what we wanted. So Chris is like, "Well, do you have an office? Do you have a builder? Do you have a designer?" I'm like, "No, we don't. We have to find the space first." Like, "Yeah, but the space and the design go hand in hand." So that was when we reached out to you. We actually got referred to you by Chris and we started the journey. So take us through how ODC supports clients through that first initial phase of picking, because at that point, you never charged us, Peter. So
No, I didn't.
I don't know if that's a unique thing or whether you just like the smile, but yeah, so you really supported us at that point and you did the floor plans on all the places we looked at to see what we wanted to create would actually work in that space. So tell us how that works and is that a common thing and how you add value to clients in that space, and take us through that journey for us.
So we're a specialised interior design and construction company, technically what they call a D&C company. And then the other version is you can have set architects that a client can talk to get an idea of a feel. But we always find that the D&C mould is better for our clientele because we've also got the experience of the interior design, the space planning, but most importantly, the construction and the costs. And as we all know now, costs are a big factor in people's decision making. So that's probably one of the key items that a client needs to look at when they're considering their particular office and the space and the location and the particular building. Every building's set up differently as well. People wouldn't realise that when they come into a building, but us having the experience and the know-how and the knowledge, we can look at a particular building and say to our clients that this is a good fit for you, or no, this is not a good fit for you. And I think we experienced that ourselves, Sevan, over the journey of the different buildings that you looked at. And then when you actually decided that 250 Camberwell Road was the place for you, you also said to me, I want to be on the top floor. I want the top floor.
Can we talk through that? Because that was an awesome story.
It was an awesome story. And when we did go to the top floor, I looked at it and I know that I convinced you not to go onto the top floor. And you go, Peter, I want the signature spot in the building. And I'm going, but this is not the greatest spot in the building. And we went to the floor below. And then I actually demonstrated to you why it was a better floor. And after you seeing that and acknowledging that, you go, Peter, yes, you're right. And I think that was a big fundamental shift in your own thinking of what would be best for Alexander Spencer at 250 Camberwell Road.
That was a really interesting story because the landlord or the agent took us to the top floor first. And the top floor has a balcony. And look, it's not the best balcony in the world. It was a top floor. And the way that the square meters work, we probably would have taken the whole floor, and that appealed to us. And when they said, oh, do you want to have a look at the other floors? I'd already picked the top floor. And I'm like, all right, let's just go down to the levels below. I went down, and I wasn't really paying attention even at the second floor. And I was walking around thinking, yep, I want the top floor. It was after the conversation we had, when we actually left the building, I'm like, I can't remember what the second floor even looked like, the one below. And it was the second time we came, I paid way more attention to it. I'm like, he's right. This is way better. And I have to say, honestly, if we didn't, I'm not saying that other builders wouldn't have done that, but I think for the listeners out here that want to go out there, try to find an office themselves and just pick it without a designer in mind and bring a designer in later or a builder in later, I think you'll be doing yourself a disjustice because we didn't pay for it. But knowing what you did for us in those early stages, I would have paid for that advice. Definitely. I don't know if that's a general thing, but definitely you added value there. You also helped us pick orientation. So talk us through the thinking around what happens when businesses go out to build offices or look for office space. What should they look for? You specifically picked an area, which again, I wouldn't have picked because the people that don't know, we actually chose to look away from the junction, away from the actual corner of the junction where Camberwell Road, Riversdale Road, Burke Road meet. We actually chose a section that's away from that for a particular reason. And it's because, it overlooks greenery, it has much better natural light, and visually it's just a better part of the building. Again, I wouldn't have picked that. And you articulated that really well. So tell our listeners some of the tips that you would give them if they just for whatever reason didn't have the opportunity or won't have the opportunity to bring a builder in. What are the key things they need to do when they look for an office space and they don't have the builder at their disposal?
With that in mind, what we try and do as a company, ODC Design, is we look at the space and the footprint that the actual client wants to take. We try and establish, are they a 500 square metre fit out or are they 1,000 square metres? In the case of yourself, Sevan, I think at the time when we were talking to Chris, you were somewhere between 800 and 1,000 square metres. What we did was we dived in very deeply into how your organisation works, how many offices you wanted to consider, how many meeting rooms, and you threw in a podcast room, which we're sitting in at the moment, which was something a bit different for ODC. And the first time, there's not too many podcast offices or rooms being built around. And then how many workstations, and then you talked about your collaboration space and your staff breakout. And then you threw another red herring into me. I want a bar. And I go, you want a bar? Yes, I want it to be one of the best bars. I want stone. And you actually said to me, I wanted a keg in there. I go, really? You want a keg inside an office?
I'm really annoyed that you convinced me not to put the keg in, by the way. I'm really I really want the keg. Can we, after this, go to the bar and see if we can put a keg in? No, I'm joking. But I did want a keg.
Yeah, but I told you the maintenance behind the keg.
I know.
And that's, oh, no, I don't want that maintenance. So, no. We gave you some really solid advice throughout the journey. But also when we come into a particular building and look at the space, I know you took me up to the top floor first, and I had a look at it. And we talked about, you mentioned the balcony before. The balcony was a brick wall, which was 1.2 metres high. So when we were standing in there or sitting at a desk, you were going to look through a piece of glass, you were going to look 2 metres, and you were going to look into a brick wall. And to me, that didn't make any sense at all. And you go, oh, yeah, you're right. I said, if we go down to the floor below, we've got full height glass. And when you're actually sitting at your desk, or in this case, we put sit-stand desks in for you as well, you're going to have a better visual. And then we looked at the orientation of the building, the greenery of the park next door, the architecture of the church, which was next to the building as well. And we said to you that these were really key elements of good layout for you to actually sit onto this floor plate. So the floor plate here is around about 1,200 square metres. And once we worked out your brief, you were sitting in around about 900 square metres of space. So it left another 300 or 400 square metres on the floor. And I said to you at the time, because you were key to actually have looking at the junction. And then we came down and we go, the junction's not that great a view, Sevan. The greater view is here. So we orientated your building with the best views. Once we've actually done the orientation of the best views on the floor plate for you, we then look at key items with inside your brief. And for you, it was like, I want the front of house and the reception area to have a real wow factor about it. So we designed the boardroom in a particular area. We had a very open reception with waiting area with some really signature waiting chairs and a custom rug and timber flooring. And then we built a number of internal meeting rooms to 6 people, and then the podcast room, and then we built 17 offices for you and 50-odd workstations and your large collaboration space and
the bar.
And the bar.
Without the keg.
Without the keg. But you also got the stadium flooring, stadium seating as well. So that was really good for your town hall meetings.
So we did some stuff different. Let's talk about differences. We were lucky enough to build something post-COVID. And other than this mandate that I gave, the reasons we wanted to do some of these things was attract clients, attract staff, but also bring our existing staff back into the office. We're fortunate enough to actually have a lot of staff that still work in the office full time in terms of 5 days a week. But we wanted that to be scaled and really bring them back in. And it's actually worked. Tell us about some projects you're working with at the moment or ideas you have that you believe will attract people to start working from home and come back into the office. What advice do you give to the people out there that are now going out and building offices or even thinking about it? What are some things that they should look at doing where they will actually get people back in?
Some of those key elements now are trying to open up the ceiling spaces. So for 40, 50 years, there's been ceiling tiles in there with acoustic ratings behind them. If you open up part of that and bring in a partial industrial look and feel, that's sort of the more modern way to do offices. Some of the other key finishes is some eco paneling, which helps with sound buffering, timber flooring or polished concrete, custom rugs, some really good finishes and good element and bringing in coffee machines. And in your case, you brought in the bar for entertaining with your clientele out of hours. And that was one of your key things. But I think probably the biggest thing is collaboration spaces. And there's a number of different ways to do that with island benches, with high benches or campfire couches with TV screens and full audio-visual capabilities is one of the key items.
Yeah, another thing that we did, and it cost a bit of money at the time, but we pulled the trigger on it, was we were making decisions about the sit-down, stand-up desks. And I remember the conversation was all the offices were going to get sit-down, stand-up. We wanted to then make it available to the workstations. And we were like, okay, so for every pod you have one, so 1 in 4, 1 in 6. And I remember turned to Jeffrey, my business partner, and said, well, are you going to be the one that's going to pick who gets it and who doesn't? It's just going to be silly. I remember you said, Sevan, each one's quite, it'll add up. And look, we chose to do sit down, stand up all across the whole office. And the reason we did that was not a lot of people have that ability at home. And we wanted them, when they came into the office, to be able to stand up and work and be able to bring their desk at different heights. If they are I know that there's a couple of people here that are much taller than the average height, and their desks sit a lot higher, and maybe their desks at home won't. And we had the other issue was I really try to convince my staff to have 2 screens. We have 3 in the old office, and we kind of made the desks a little bit smaller, and we're like, 3 is going to be a bit too much. And we tried to convince them to go to 2 and a laptop. But we stuck with 3 because that's what they wanted. So I think for the listeners out there, I think you really got to think about how your staff work and really try to give them a better experience in the office. The collaboration areas is obviously a big part of that, the entertainment areas, but most people sit at their desks for at least 6 to 7 hours of that day. And I think that desk part really for us really helped. And I'm glad that we did choose to sit down, stand up across the whole workstation. So that was really good.
I just want to touch on that for you too, Sevan, for your listeners. With a sit-stand desk, the key elements also, it's not just the sit-stand, but the way the monitor arms and the bracketry, and are you bringing in a laptop or you're sticking with old hard drives, or how your IT is going to work. I'd have to say probably 50% of businesses, when they relocate, they're going to consider whole new IT outfit, like new laptops, and how that bracketry and all that will work. You've also got to consider that when you are sitting, a desk is normally between 720 and 730 high, but everybody's a different height. So when they're standing and also when they're looking at their screen, the key to looking at a screen, regardless if you're sitting or standing, is 2/3 of the screen. And everybody's body ratio is different. So having the sit-stand desk going up and down, you've also got to move your arms for your monitors to make sure that they're economically correct.
Great advice. Let's dive into costs. So the costs have gone up. I remember when we discussed about budget. What do people should expect when they're going out there to refurb a completely brand new office? How much is a minimum for a basic fit out? You get sort of the middle of the range, it's X, and then a top end fit out would cost X, Y, Z. Just so that people that are listening, if they're doing some budgets, can put that in their sort of thinking around what it might cost.
Always a tricky one to answer. And the reason why it's so tricky to answer is because at the early onset, most people don't really know what they want. And us as a company, we try to educate our clientele of what they really need to make their fit out work. For many, many years, everyone has said that a cost of a fit out is $1,000 a square metre. I've heard that for 20 years. And I just think to myself when I hear someone go, $1,000 a square metre, you don't get what you used to get 20 years ago. And that mindset is still there. For nowadays, you've got to be considering somewhere between $1,350 to $1,800 for your basic fit out.
Basic, yep.
If you're introducing some really key elements and want a certain look and feel, you're well over the $2,000 mark. But inside that, what am I actually getting? And let's just use AV as an example. I know that when we chatted about AV, you're going, but I've got this screen over here. I go, yeah, but Sevan, that telly's about 8 years old and it's not going to cut it in this new environment. But do I really need to get a new one? Yes, you do. So anyway, we had a chat with George from Tasman AV and long chat and understanding your needs, and your budget originally of $50,000 blew out to nearly $180,000. You remember that conversation?
Well, they're installing the 98-inch TV in the boardroom as we speak. So,
yes.
Yeah, look, AV was a big part of it because we didn't have the greatest AV. So we like blowing budgets.
But it comes down to the look and the feel, and you're here for 10 years and it's a long time.
That's probably the other consideration that the listeners need to consider. Even at the basic level, 1,500, let's say a square metre, 400 square metres, that's $600,000. Businesses can struggle to commit beyond maybe 3-5 years. How do they navigate through that? Because I mean, we were fortunate enough to be committed to 10. So I think for me, the reason that the budget blew out a lot over time was I knew we were here for 10 years. And if we're going to do it right, let's do it right, because it's very hard for me to call you and go, I made a mistake there. Can we fix it? A lot of these probably are going to be difficult to fix. And how do businesses allocate their funds based on sort of the length of their leases? Is there any advice you have? You've been doing this for a while.
What I would advise that if anybody's looking to relocate or even refurbish their office is to get an interior designer, a D&C company in to look at it. You've got the expertise of the design element side of it, the costing side of it, and the actual construction side of it. One-stop shop, D&C. Us as a company, we've been around for 40 years, close to it, and we've given a lot of advice to a lot of corporate clients over that journey on best fit, and it just comes back to our experience and knowledge. The other key element is our staff that work for us. We employ interior designers that have got bachelor degrees. They've got the expertise to understand the needs, the look, the feel, and most importantly, our client's vision. Vision and budget can always be two ways apart. And then it's a matter of navigating what's best fit. And that's where our expertise come in to make it work for you.
So we talk about cost. Let's dive into how you pick a builder, because that was also challenging for us. Maybe not challenging for us in the sense that, you know, we were fortunate enough to meet you and we were lucky that you came on board, but ODC can't do every single office fit out in Victoria. For those guys that want to look at hiring a D&C builder for their office fit out, what advice do you have for people on how they should select that person? What should they look for? Like, I was impressed because when I first met you, you came in a suit, you were very organized. There's lots of other things I can say, but what advice do you give to our audience around, you're about to pick your D&C builder, what steps should they take and what should they look for?
Probably one of the things is, can I work with him? It's a long journey, and not often enough do you actually relocate your business. It usually happens on a cycle of 5, 10, 15 years. I've had clients that have sat in some office space for 20 years and then they thought, oh, we've been here long enough, it's time for a move. When we actually get shortlisted and we're up against some of our opposition, we try to understand our clients' needs, and that's diving in really deep to what they need in their office. The way I look at it and our staff look at it, one of the most important things is what is actually sitting on the floor. And people go, well, what do you mean by what's sitting on the floor, Peter? Okay, what size footprint of workstations do I need? How many offices do I need? Do I need storage? Do I need an IT room? Do I need this? All this takes space and allocation of where it's going to sit. You can maneuver it around on a space. You can have a comms room shown here one day and then, oh no, what about if we flip it here because of these reasons? It's closer to electrical switchboards to bring cabling in and things like that. So understanding what they need is important.
One of the things, Peter, I struggled with was negotiating, or not necessarily negotiating the price, but understanding how to navigate through the pricing and all that. What we liked about what you did was you firstly took us through the journey. You actually went down and went through the quoting process. You articulated each step of what was required to be quoted. Now, that number changed, the commentary around what we did changed, but you actually produced that. And I think we felt way more trusted in you because of the fact that you went all the way through nearly to working drawings. That's how close we got to before we even signed with you. What we didn't like with the other company was they got to a point where they said they got to that point, but they wouldn't put their hand on the table around how this thing was going to not necessarily cost, but where it was going to end up. And they said, look, you need to go through our 73-point process and go through until we get to that point. Whereas you actually gave us an indication of how it was going to be. And when we landed on the last figure, we were still working with that first document you produced. So for our clients out there, what are the things that can go wrong in picking a design and construction company? And you go, geez, I wish I could have just mentored that client and this is what they should have done. In picking that builder, what are the mistakes that everyone makes? Not builder, but design and construction builder.
The fundamental mistake that people look at is not fully understanding what they're getting. So what we do with our experience, we demonstrate with a space plan of how your space is going to look like, and then we actually break it down and provide a budget. And inside that budget is got full specifications, full requirements of what you need, and it's all laid out in a 20-page document. When we actually sit down with a client and demonstrate that particular plan and that budget, that's when the penny drops to the client. Yes, that's what I do need, but I didn't actually realise I did need it. And a lot of companies out there don't actually give the full picture to their clients just to try and win their business. I have been in the game a very, very long time, and my reputation is the most important thing. But when I'm sitting opposite a client, I want to make sure that we're delivering for them what they actually need and not shortcut it to get appointed where other companies out there can do that. And I know sometimes our budgets are a lot higher and we've missed business, but I'd much prefer to actually miss the business but still be honourable to myself that I've delivered what they need and what we understand how the building operates at that point. It's when you actually start getting into the working drawings and the finishes and the documentation, and when you've got the full set of documents, that's actually when we start going to tender with all our different sub-trades. So we have set sub-trades of partitioning guys, electricians, air conditioning guys, fire protection guys, plumbers, joiners, workstations, loose furniture, etc. And once you've actually got the full set of documentation, that's when you can actually provide your client with a fixed cost based on that set of documentation. We've got a very nice showroom and office in Malvern, and we actually ask our clients to come down to our office, and that's where we actually go through it. I think, Sevan, we had probably about 8 meetings there, and you brought your whole executive team numerous times. We went over finishes, plans, working drawings. I think I had something like 50 to 60 different chair types brought in. You test drove them, and with the colours and finishes, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it was a journey, and picking the person that you want to actually work with and get along on these type of projects, they're a good 12 to 18 months journey. You've got to make sure that you can work with those people, but most importantly, their cost and their deliverables go hand in hand.
Peter, what is the one thing that you hate putting into offices?
Over the journey, and I've been in the game a very, very long time, there was compactuses.
What is a compactus for those that don't know what it is?
It's a storing mobile shelving unit. In simple terms, it rolls across. The really big ones had like a steering wheel that you actually manoeuvred across, and it would then slide across the tracks. I've pulled more out in the last 10 years than what I've put in. And those compactuses, people would put all their files into and store things away. I haven't put a compactus in an office for more than 15 years. And the reason why I don't like them, one, you've got to get a structural engineer involved. They've got to actually be in the loading zone inside a building. And sometimes our client will say, or they used to say, I need one 4.5 metres. And I go, but the loading zone is only 3 metres around here. I can't make it fit. And it was always a struggle of where those compactuses went, and then actually bringing them in and setting them up and making sure that they rolled perfectly over the tracks was always a bit of a pain in the bum.
Yeah, do not put a compactus in your new office.
We haven't seen compactuses go in for a long time. With IT and servers and that, everything's stored there and people scan in their information or keep it on their server.
Obviously, technology, trends, AI, things are moving really fast, right? I look around us and I'm like, I think we've got the best of the best, but how quickly is this going to get outdated? So I don't know the answer to that question, but what do you believe some of the things that are going to come in the future? So I'm visualizing these virtual goggles. I've got a TV here that says the bottom line, but are we going to do this with goggles, with unique different technology that's going to maybe disrupt the office space? And was I silly to sign a 10-year lease? Tell us about the future of office design and office working.
It hasn't changed. It's changed, but not to the extreme that we're not going to be here. I look at what we all went through over COVID. Like, businesses survived, some businesses went. The future, to me personally, doesn't probably look much different in 10 years' time. There'll be different technology that'll come in, different way to do specific things, but I still feel that people will still get up in the morning and they'll still come to an office. The interaction and meeting with other people and having that chit-chat around the staff breakout area is important to a company's culture. The technology sort of backs onto the back of that as well. Listen, it's changed a little bit. I'm not a technology guru as such. I just know how to put it all together. And I've got people that are around me that have supported our company for a very long time, and we rely on there from times to introduce them to our clients.
And I have to say, you've done an amazing job. And I want to say, again, a big thank you for doing it for us. We could talk a lot about this stuff, but we have run out of time, Peter. I want to say thank you so much for joining me on The Bottom Line. And yeah, it was great to have your insights in and how businesses can potentially build their office.
Thank you very much, Sevan. It's been a real pleasure working with you over the last 18 months. We couldn't have been more excited about what we created here for you and the future of Alexander Spence for 10 years and beyond. Thank you.
This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. This podcast was produced by accountancy firm Alexander Spencer. At Alexander Spencer, we've been helping business owners realise their goals since 1952. And we play a pivotal role in developing, implementing, and supervising the business goals and strategies of our clients. To find out how we can help your business succeed, head to our website, alexanderspencer.com.au. To make sure you don't miss an episode of The Bottom Line, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Sevan Tuna, and we'll be back next episode with more tips to help you transform your business. And that's The Bottom Line.